September 1st had arrived, and the sun barely penetrated through the dense branches of the trees, casting strange shadows on the path leading to the abandoned school known as Twilight Gates. The students of Villawood City couldn't resist the mysterious pull, and once again, they had gathered in front of the old, ominously looking building. From a distance, you could already see the cracked walls and windows covered in mold, as if nature itself was trying to reclaim the building into its embrace. The wind whispered quiet stories of the past, and the eerie creaking of the boards on the windows seemed like a response to the students' greetings. A group of teenagers stood before the entrance, feeling the nervous beating of their hearts and the apprehensive glances at the door, as if they expected it to swing open any moment, revealing something horrifying from the darkness. But their inner fear was shrouded in curiosity, and they decided to step across the threshold of this enigmatic school to uncover the mystery that awaited them inside. The school's interior was filled with an eerie silence that seemed to reflect all the horrors that had transpired within its walls over the years of abandonment. The students slowly entered the classrooms, exchanging nervous glances. But when they looked at the blackboards where lessons were usually written, their hearts skipped a beat. Dark, almost black liquid resembling blood had been used to write strange messages. The letters appeared distorted, as if they were written in an ancient language. Each message was addressed to a specific student, and the horrifying content left no room for doubt. These were predictions of their own nightmares. The students' eyes slid over these dreadful messages, and vivid images of the horrors that could befall them instantly filled their imaginations. Some of the students struggled to contain screams that threatened to escape, while others attempted to flee. But the doors seemed to have closed in front of them on their own. The messages seemed somehow alive, pulsating on the boards, as if the breath of something sinister animated them. Each student's heart beat in unison with the tension that pervaded the room. They couldn't explain who or how these predictions had been written, and most importantly, what horrors awaited them in the future. Amid the pounding hearts of the students, the classroom filled with excitement. Some suggested that it was just a prank by the seniors, while others were convinced it was the work of an unholy force. On the blackboard, covered in ominous predictions, lay a wet sponge. However, when one of the students attempted to erase the message, the text remained unchanged, as if it were carved into the very board itself. Martha, a girl with red hair, quickly started searching the internet on her smartphone for any information about such phenomena. She stumbled upon an article about ancient incantations written in blood for added potency. It was excessively grim, but it provided some explanation for what was happening. Jake, who had a fascination with the city's history, recalled an old legend about a student who had died in this school long ago. Rumor had it that he was a master of dark magic and, before his death, placed a curse on the building. The teenagers decided to explore the city archives, hoping to find more information about the history of Twilight Gates. Perhaps the key to unraveling their terrifying predictions lay in the history of this place. After all, to defeat an enemy, one must first know who they're dealing with. Among the students, increasingly strange and eerie rumors began to circulate about the history of Twilight Gates. Some said the school had indeed been a site of ancient rituals that had awakened a sinister entity. Others claimed it had become a portal to a world of shadows and dark magic. Parents began forbidding their children from going near Twilight Gates, insisting that something unseen and malevolent lurked there. Elderly residents of the city whispered in secret that the messages on the blackboards were just the beginning, and that the malevolent entity, awakened by horrifying rituals, was preparing for something even more dreadful. Dark rumors heightened the unease in the city. People started avoiding Twilight Gates, steering clear of it even during the daytime. At night, when the shadows sprawled across the land, the dark building seemed to come alive, emitting an eerie magnetic field that drew those daring enough to approach. the teenagers persisted in their investigations. They uncovered long-forgotten manuscripts that spoke of a power sleeping within the school, and the need to decipher its secrets to free the city from the curse. However, the deeper they delved, the darker their understanding became, and the more perilous their quest appeared. Amidst the pounding hearts of the students, they dared to lift their gaze and look at their reflections in the windows. The reflections, which had been familiar and ordinary, now appeared distorted and alien. Their eyes, meeting their own reflections, seemed to pull them into a world of darkness and nightmares. Mixed with expressions of horror, the faces of the students were reflected on the window panes, but the mimicry of the reflections twisted into sinister grins and grimaces of terror. One of the girls covered her face with her hands, but instead, she saw her reflection slowly descending, as if trying to escape from the window. Some inexplicable compulsion made them continue to stare at their reflections, as if they were trying to find answers to their questions within them. However, the longer they looked, the more eerie and unpredictable these reflections seemed, and the students began to realize that they could no longer control what was happening. An invisible wall of fear and anxiety began to rise in the room, and the reflections in the windows seemed to become living entities, pulling them into their ominous world. However, when they turned away from the windows and tried to leave, they felt as if someone or something was watching them from within, through their own reflections, as if trying to peer into their souls. Under the influence of an indefinable fear, the students cautiously approached the windows, trying to discern the source of the strange sounds and murmurs. The wind, which usually brought freshness and life, now carried something more ominous. It swept through the gaps in the windows, as if trying to penetrate their souls. The noise of the wind grew louder, but it was distorted and twisted, as if the flesh of a living being, and each of its sighs sent shivers down the spines of everyone in the classroom. The air grew colder, and the students felt a chill seeping into their bones, making them shiver from cold and apprehension. The light from the windows slowly began to dim, as if dark forces were pulling it from outside. Their shadows began to elongate and distort on the floor, taking on unnatural forms. They noticed that their own shadows started to move independently, as if they were living creatures, tracking their every movement. Some unseen gaze began to hold them to the windows. They felt that something was observing them from behind the glass, that the eyes of a dark entity were penetrating their souls. They tried to avert their gaze, but the sense of compulsion was too strong, as if it were a challenge they could not ignore. While they stood before the blackboards, they heard a faint, muffled rustling in the distance, as if footsteps echoing through emptiness. The rustling grew louder and closer, and the students noticed that the shadows created by the light from the windows began to move independently, like living creatures pursuing them. The students continued to stand at the windows, their gazes fixed on the darkness outside. With each passing second, they felt that something invisible but incredibly menacing was approaching the school. The air was filled with tension, and even their breaths sounded like disruptions to the fragile harmony of the world. Then something began to take shape in the distance, solid silhouettes, distorted gazes, as if their contours were blurred. The entities were ethereal and elusive, their forms changing with every moment, as if trying to elude human scrutiny. The students only caught glimpses of them out of the corners of their eyes, and as soon as they turned their heads, the entities vanished, leaving only a chilling sensation. The ominous figures moved around the school, appearing in one window and disappearing in another. Their outlines distorted and faded, and the students could not make out their faces or forms. But the fear they carried with them was palpable, like the cold in the air, as if it heralded an inevitable horror. The students began to feel that these entities were everywhere, even in the darkest corners of the classroom. They sensed that they were being observed from behind every shadow, from every hidden nook. Every gaze of the students felt like an intrusion into their sanctuary, and they felt that the entities could sense their fear, feeding on it. Under Jake's chilling gaze, the students felt his figure slowly dissolve into the air, like mist under the morning sun. What had been a person just a second ago now disappeared as if he had never existed. The visibility of his body turned into shapeless shadows that dispersed like smoke, leaving only the contours of his silhouette in the air. The students were left in bewilderment, their eyes trying to track every movement, but Jake's essence seemed to have dissolved into the darkness. However, they felt that something invisible was still present nearby, as if it were observing them from the realm of shadows. A cold breeze rose, as if the breath of the one watching from the darkness. As if in response to some silent summons, the shadows around them began to thicken and take shape. Dark outlines assumed the structure of a human, but it was not Jake. They slowly approached the students, distorting the darkness around them, as if they were sent by the very depths of darkness. With each step, the entities filled the room more and more, and the students felt the cold becoming denser. Invisible hands seemed to penetrate through the air, touching their skin, and they felt the searing heat of their touch. In the darkness, the threat became tangible, and they realized that they were no longer alone in this room. The entities continued to draw near, their outlines shifting and distorting like liquid smoke. Sinister glows emanated from their dark eyes, enveloping them in a flickering radiance. The air was filled with a magical aura, and the students felt the balance of the world disrupted, as if these ominous beings were weaving reality together with the world of nightmares. The entities approached even closer, and with each of their steps, the normal order of things was disrupted. The floor beneath them changed its texture, and the walls seemed to bend under their influence. Light began to refract and distort around them, creating the illusion that their presence brought chaos to the surrounding world. The students felt their own fears and anxieties taking untangible forms around them. Nightmarish visions spilled out, obscuring reality, and it became difficult to discern where the nightmare ended and reality began. The entities drew nearer, as if extracting their deepest and darkest thoughts. Each of their movements seemed to be part of an ancient sorcery, a magic that could bridge the gap between worlds. The students realized they were facing a force they could neither comprehend nor stop. The entities manipulated reality as if toying with them like puppets, forcing them to grapple with illusions and nightmares that took on the form of reality. The students sensed that the strength of their willpower and courage began to resist the power of the entities. Gazing into the distorted outlines, they summoned all their strength to preserve their sanity and resist succumbing to the nightmares that enveloped their consciousness. They closed their eyes and focused on their breath, attempting to ward off the ominous influence. The incantation that Emily had uttered earlier echoed in their minds, a reminder of the power of magic. They began to repeat these words aloud, as if convincing themselves that magic could protect them from this sinister threat. With each uttered word, they felt their own energy starting to oppose the darkness. The entities, sensing resistance, began to vanish and reappear in different corners of the room, as if attempting to bypass the students' defenses. The shadows wavered and writhed like water, but they could no longer penetrate their minds as they had before. The students felt their inner fire beginning to dispel the darkness, tearing through the shrouds of illusion. Their determination was unbreakable, and they realized that the only way to defeat the malevolent force was to believe in themselves and their own abilities. With each passing moment, the sinister entities grew paler, their outlines dissolving into the air like smoke. The students continued to chant the incantation, and light returned to the room, which had been marred by the power of nightmares. After a few moments, the dark forces finally dissipated, and the room was once again enveloped in its ordinary atmosphere. The students stood there, catching their breath after their struggle with the malevolent force, their hearts beating in unison. They felt how their friendship and determination had helped them overcome the darkness that had sought to take hold of their minds. The gazes of the students met, and they understood that they had managed to ward off the threat that awaited them in the twilight gates. They realized that their friendship and belief in themselves had been their greatest weapons against the darkness. In this battle, they had not only found answers to their fears, but also the strength to conquer the most sinister of nightmares.